morning, everybody, and welcome to Feedback Conversations. I'm absolutely delighted that you've chosen to join us here this morning and look at how you can develop your skills around feedback. Now, today is all about how do you have feedback conversations that are both clear and kind, and as a result, you are proud of the conversations that you have. So let me just introduce myself first. So I am the founder of Juice and the Lemon, and we specialise in helping people have clear and kind, difficult conversations that they're proud of. So I've spent 30 years working in FMCG. I know this industry inside out and back to front and love it. I've worked for organisations such as Mars Confectionery, GlaxoSmithKline, and latterly Associated British Foods, and worked most of the time in sales and sales management before I moved into learning and development. And throughout that period, what I saw time and time again was those people who were brilliant at providing feedback, those feedback gurus in any team, in any organisation, were the standout individuals. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, if you are brilliant at feedback, you have got an incredible opportunity to elevate the performance in other people. Feedback is the cheapest, easiest way for you to help people perform at a higher level. Firstly, what you can do is let people know what they're doing brilliantly, and hence what they should repeat doing in order to be effective going forward. But also, where there is a performance gap, where somebody could be doing something differently, if you can provide feedback in a way that people hear it and receive it and put it into action, you will be a formidable peer, you will be a formidable manager. The other reason that feedback is so powerful is it helps us have relationships that are transparent and built on trust. So often, and I've seen this in my 30 years, is relationships stop being effective when we allow issues to get in the way. But if you are effective at feedback, you can manage the issues and the problems and have the types of relationships that you want, and hence optimize your influence around the organization. And if you ever want to sense check how healthy your relationship is with another individual, how healthy the relationships are in your team, or even your organization, just sense check what is the time lag between a problem being identified and a problem being discussed. The shorter that time lag in any relationship, the healthier it is, because both parties are courageous and prepared to raise the issues that are in the way. They're prepared to provide the feedback to each other so that they can get on and do what they need to do. So before we go any further, I would love to hear from you on the following question. So if feedback is so powerful, if feedback is so effective, why do so many of us not provide feedback? Okay, so Robin is going to pop up a poll for us in just a moment, and I'd love to know, do any of these 5 reasons stop you providing feedback in the workplace? So Robin, are you happy to put the poll up for us? That's perfect. Right, so what's interesting is, so 30% of people are worried about the reaction that they're going to get from the other person, and that is such a common issue that we have. And what we're going to do today is look at how can you provide feedback in an objective way so that people stay in the best possible position to receive that feedback and are less likely to have an emotional reaction. So that's absolutely what we're going to look at. The other thing to bear in mind is the only person's behavior you can control in any conversation is your own. Okay, so long as you're behaving appropriately in this conversation, the other person's reaction is absolutely up to them. Okay, I'm worried about demotivating hardworking people. Again, I think that's a very, very common worry, especially with so many of us working virtually at the moment. We're not always aware of some of the challenges and the issues that people are facing whilst we're working virtually. And does it feel appropriate to give feedback when people are working so hard? And again, what I'm hoping to show you is providing feedback is the fairest and kindest thing that we can do for anybody. Okay, so let's move on from there. We've talked about why being so good at feedback can help you personally, but I also think it's interesting to think about, why is feedback so important for a team? In teams where people opt out and don't provide feedback to each other, what often happens is we have the wrong conversation happening with the wrong person. So if I've got a colleague who's constantly late for me, and I really should be having a feedback conversation with them about the impact of their poor timekeeping, if I have the conversation with somebody else, actually what I'm in danger of doing is having the wrong conversation with the wrong person. I'm starting to create a toxic environment. That other colleague knows that I'm breaking trust, and if I'm prepared to gossip about somebody behind their backs, then I'm probably prepared to gossip about them behind their back. And it just creates an environment where we start to create resentment, frustration, blame, and anger. Okay. Whereas when we have a team who choose to opt in, who choose to provide feedback with each other, who are upfront and transparent about what is going on, you tend to be aligned with your values. You are kinder and more compassionate. We boundary set better, so we're much clearer about what's okay and what's not okay. You feel more peaceful and at ease with yourself, and your needs are met. Okay. So hopefully that's giving you lots of reasons about why, building this skill and getting courageous with this skill is so important. Just one other thought I want to share with you. Lots of us going into feedback conversations feel uncomfortable, and that's normal. Providing feedback to people is a risk. But what I always remind myself, I've been doing this for years and years and years, and I still feel uncomfortable going into some feedback conversations. Am I prepared to get past that moment of discomfort in order to save hours of resentment? So if somebody has provided me a piece of work and perhaps the quality of it is not good enough, am I prepared to step into that moment of discomfort and provide feedback to them that the work isn't good enough? Or am I going to duck out of the conversation and have hours of resentment when at 10 o'clock at night I am still correcting their work because I didn't have the courage to have the conversation when I should? So I always think that's just a really interesting one for us to remember. Right, before we get into the material, I would really like you to think about a feedback conversation that you need to be having, so that as we think about the material, you can think about it in relation to the conversation that you need to have. So can you just grab a pen and paper, and just jot down the feedback conversation I'd like to be able to have is, and then just who you would like to have it with, what is it about, and because. Okay, so for example, it might be the feedback conversation I'd like to be able to have is with my line manager about my weekly one-to-ones, because she has cancelled them for the last 3 weeks on the trot, and as a result, I'm unclear about my priorities and don't feel in touch with what's happening in the team. So I'm just going to give you a couple of moments just to jot that down and think about what is the feedback conversation that you need to be having at the moment, that perhaps you're opting out of, that perhaps you're ducking, and you can think about in relation to this material. Right, I'll just give you one more moment to do that. Okay. Right, so we're going to be looking at 3 elements here with regards to feedback conversations. So 3 things that you really want to have in place so that you can be a feedback guru is emotional management. So can you go into these conversations in a resourceful place? Are you able to structure them so that they are clear? And I'm just going to provide a couple of tips and tricks in the toolbox that will ensure that the message is in a format that helps it be received. So what I'd like to do first of all is just talk about emotional management and just talk about how can we go into conversations in a resourceful way. So let me stop sharing the screen, because what I'd like to do, okay, is share with you a model of the brain. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that your fist here is your brain. And all of the information that goes into your brain goes up your brainstem. So just imagine your brainstem is here, and all of the information goes up the brainstem. It hits a filter system. The filter system here dictates how you perceive the world. And in your filter system will be your values, the messages that you've got as a child, the culture that you work in at the moment, and the messages that it gives you. And this dictates your perception. From there, the information goes to the emotional part of your brain, and it goes to the logical part of your brain. Emotional part of your brain has got one job and one job only: to keep you safe. So what it is doing is scanning the environment every 4 to 6 seconds, looking to see if there's anything that's going to threaten you. If you think back to prehistoric man, when he was out on the African plain, he would be scanning the environment for dangerous animals. And if he spotted a dangerous animal, he would go into fight, flight, or freeze. So he might fight the animal and kill it. He might go into flight and run like hell. Or if your child in the cage, what you may do is just play dead, hope that the animal will sniff around you and then leave. The problem is, in our modern society, we still have the same brain structure as prehistoric man. And when we perceive a danger, we still go into fight, flight, or freeze. So if your mobile phone goes off and your boss's number flicks up on your mobile phone, lots of us will have that reaction, okay? And our emotional part of our brain, okay, comes to the forefront. The logical part of our brain, which does our evaluation, our rational thinking, our considered, logical step-by-step thinking, gets triggered, gets disengaged. And what happens is we end up reacting from the emotional part of our brain rather than responding intelligently from the combined efforts of the logical and emotional part of our brain. When we get triggered, our IQ levels drop by about 20 points, and we tend to go into black and white, narrow thinking. And I'm sure many of you experienced it. You know, if somebody turns around to you and says, "Oh, Angela, please can I offer you some feedback?" We'll often smile politely, but inside we're going, "Oh my goodness, what have I done wrong?" Okay. So when we are going into feedback conversations, what's really, really important is for each of us to go in a resourceful way. But when you are providing feedback to somebody else, to make sure they are resourceful as well. Because what we want to have is high quality conversations where two people are talking to each other in an intelligent, articulate, and problem-solving way. When two people are talking to each other in a triggered way, which we often see at home, what you get is blame and judgment and finger pointing, and you will not resolve the problem. Okay, so let me just show you this as on the slide so you can see what this looks like in the diagram. So in the diagrams you can see we've got our values and beliefs here. You can see the information will go to the emotional part of your brain, and it will go to the logical part of your brain as well. It takes 1/100 of a second for the information to go to the emotional part, and it takes 2 seconds for the information to get to the logical part of your brain. So the emotional part of your brain always gets first bite of the cherry, okay? Always, okay? Even those of you who say I'm highly, highly, highly logical, the emotional part of your brain gets to the information first, all right? From there, if you are triggered, and it is the emotional part of your brain that is operating, we become reactive, we are hot, we become heated, we become overwhelmed, we become tense, all right? Whereas if it's the human part, if it's the logical part of our brain which is engaged, which when we're relaxed, we're much more likely to respond in a cool, controlled way. We retain our awareness, our decision making is much higher quality, we stay flexible, and we will perform at our best. Okay, I've just remembered, I'm very conscious, I haven't reminded you, we're going to be doing several question sessions during this webinar. So if you've got any questions whilst you're listening, just tap them into the chat box, and we'll be stopping for a question session in about 2 minutes. Robin will take the questions and I will answer for them for you at that stage. So any questions you've got, just put them in the chat box and we will manage them in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so this mood elevator, I think as well, is just a really nice explanation of what's happening for us at any stage. So when we're triggered, so just remember when the logical part of our brain is flipped, okay, we are in redhead here. So we may become irritated, anxious, judgy, stressed, angry. When we are resourceful, we are more likely to be patient, hopeful, creative, innovative. And as I said, what we are looking to do when we have feedback conversations with anybody, we want a bluehead to bluehead conversation, because that's where we have the high quality. If we go redhead to redhead, that's where we get the low quality discussion. And a feedback conversation is a problem-solving conversation. Okay, providing the feedback is the start of problem solving. All right, what you don't want is a feedback conversation to be the start of a blame and judgment conversation. Okay, so what would be great, Robin, is if we've got any questions at this stage. We've just got a couple of minutes now that we can spend seeing if anybody's got any questions about emotional management and how to make sure that we go into a feedback conversation in a resourceful way.
We do have a couple of questions that have come through. First one is, how do you ensure that you use your logical part of the brain and not the emotional side?
Lovely, brilliant, 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 brilliant question. Okay, so first of all, I think a lot of us recognize actually when we're starting to get triggered. So couple of tactics. If you start to feel yourself getting triggered, it may be that you want to insert a gap. So if you've got an opportunity to step away from the situation, maybe you can go for a quick walk around the block. Maybe you can just go and make a cup of tea. Can you remove yourself away from the situation? Can you remove yourself from the situation? Put yourself into a calmer place and then come back and have the conversation when you're resourceful. Sometimes you can't remove yourself. So box breathing is another brilliant way to do it. So box breathing is what the US Marines use when they go into high combat situation. So box breathing is where you breathe in through your nose to the count of 5, you hold for 5, you breathe out through your mouth to 5, and then you pause for 5. You could do that in a meeting, you could do it in a one-to-one conversation, and what it does is it just settles all of the adrenaline that is running around in your body. Is getting more oxygen to your prefrontal cortex, so the logical part of your brain here, and will give you the ability to think clearly and get that blue brain engaged. So hopefully that just gives you a couple of tactics there. Any other questions, Robin?
Let's do one more question about how do you manage personality clashes with feedback?
Okay, so personality clashes, I'm guessing where you've got behavior that you're not happy with. Is that what we're talking about?
Could the person who asked that question elaborate a little bit further, or you can raise your hands and I can unmute you. You can speak to Angela.
Lovely. Who's going to be brave? Okay, so personality clashes is so common, and hopefully we're going to come on to that in the next section when we talk about how to actually provide feedback. So if you're happy to be patient and just see if the next section answers that question.
Sorry to jump in, Angela. The person has responded that just says different types of personalities, like introvert versus extrovert.
Okay, so part of that is just, so for me, a lot of it is about assuming positive intent. So I think often we have personality clashes because we're intolerant of other people and we assume negative intent. So I'm an introvert. I often find those who lead with an extroverted energy quite exhausting, and actually, why do they have to dominate the discussion? And if I assume there's a negative intent, it's like they want to be the star of the show, they want to be center of attention, my level of tolerance goes down. Whereas if I can assume a positive intent, such as, do you know what, they've got lots of ideas, they want to drive the agenda forward, they're enthusiastic about what's taking place, actually I often find a space and an energy to incorporate that behavior and to embrace it. So I think there's something about assuming positive intent and embracing it. Now, if that behavior is having a negative impact on you, then there is an opportunity to provide feedback. But I think the intent idea is useful in the first instance for tolerance. Hopefully that helps.
Great. I just said that's a useful answer, so that answers that question a bit.
Okay, good. Okay, shall we move on then, Robin?
I think so. We do have more questions, but we can save that later on in the
Lovely. Okay, so we're going to do the next section now. So the next section now, we're going to look at how to structure your feedback, and then we will stop for questions again. So again, please just pop them in the chat box, and Robin will feed them back to me in a few minutes. So what we want to do is to really think about how do we structure feedback so that it is clear. All right. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And what often happens is when we provide feedback to other people, we hint and hope that people will get it. And we need to be braver than that. We need to be more straightforward than that. So I want to share with you the following scenario, and let's use this scenario to explain the structure that I think is very useful. So Pralita and Steve, they've been in a meeting, and Pralita presents a report to the team that both she and Steve have worked on. Okay, so it's been a virtual meeting. Excuse me. Steve has made a huge contribution to this report and feels annoyed that Pralita has not mentioned his contribution at all. At the end of the meeting, Steve finishes the meeting feeling aggrieved at the lack of recognition. All right, so I know I've sat in this scenario lots and lots of times, and I'm sure it will resonate with some of you as well. Now, Steve has got a choice. Steve can come off this meeting. He can, if he's working virtually, he can go into his kitchen, make a cup of tea. He could have a bit of a sulk. He could moan to his partner that, do you know what, his colleague Pralita has taken all the credit for this presentation and have the wrong conversation with the wrong person, and he could opt out of feedback. Or he can choose to opt in and provide feedback to Pralita that actually her behavior feels inappropriate and he's not happy with what happened in that meeting. So in any communication, there are three realities. And in this scenario, let's have a look at them. So we've got Pralita, and we've got Pralita's intent. So we've got her needs, we've got her motives, we've got her emotions, and we've got her intentions. Okay? What we've also got are Pralita's behaviors, okay, which are visible to both parties. So this is her tone, this is her gesture, this is her facial expressions. And then finally, what we have is the impact on Steve. And this is the emotion that Steve is going through, but also the response that he is having. Now, at any stage, okay, we only ever know two realities at the very beginning. So for Pralita, she only ever knows her intent and she only ever knows her behavior. If you look at Steve, okay, so, oh, sorry. And if we look at Pralita, her intention was she wanted to take a team perspective on this presentation. She wanted the team to get credit for the presentation. She didn't feel that people needed to be called out for it. If we look at Steve, Steve also only knows two realities. So he knows the impact that it's had on him, but he also knows Pralita's behavior because it was observable. He could see it in the meeting. And he feels ignored and belittled as a result of the behavior. So the key here is Steve at this stage only knows two realities. And if Steve can stick with those two realities and raise the issue with Pralita in a direct, non-accusational way, it will help both parties to understand what is going on and have a clear and kind conversation. Okay? What often happens in feedback, and this is where feedback often goes wrong, is we talk about people's intent. All right. And if Steve starts talking about Pralita's intent, he is in danger of being accusational. And what we're likely to do is have a redhead to redhead conversation. So if Steve starts talking about, actually, do you know what, you were being inconsiderate, you were being thoughtless, you were being inconsiderate, if he starts accusing her of that, she will get triggered, she will go into defense mode, and you will end up having a redhead to redhead conversation rather than a bluehead to bluehead conversation. So what Steve needs to do is stay on his side of the net. So when we're playing a game of tennis, you can only play tennis on your side of the net, all right? And it is exactly the same in feedback. You have to stay on your side of the net. You can only talk about your realities. And it's just making sure that we don't become amateur psychologists. We often think we know somebody else's intent and we have a guess about what their intent is. So take away your amateur psychologist, just talk about the reality. Keep it really, really, really clean. So how this is going to look, the feedback model we're going to talk about is so simple, but it's the simplicity that is absolutely magic. And what we want to talk about is when you, I feel. So he's going to talk about what is Pralita's observable behavior and how does he feel about it. So how this may look. Pralita, can I have a chat about this morning's meeting? Okay, so he's just going to invite Pralita into the conversation. When you didn't mention my contribution to the project, I felt ignored and belittled. Okay, so he stayed super objective and is talking about the observable behavior and the effect that has had on him. Then what he's going to do is invite her into having a problem-solving conversation. Do you have a few minutes now so that we can chat about it? I would really like to understand your perspective. Now, obviously, so Steve has gone into that conversation in a resourceful place, and I would suggest that he is presenting and speaking from a blue head. Pralita has got a choice in terms of how she responds. Remember, you cannot control anybody else's behavior. Anybody else's behavior is their choice. But if you create an environment where you go in blue head, you've got the best possible chance of them responding in blue head. And I would suggest that's a very neutral way to start the conversation. And what you're now asking, you've been very clear about what the issue is, what the impact it has had on you, and you're now inviting Pralita to share her perspective and to share how she sees it. Let me just share another couple of examples and then we will stop for questions. I'd love to hear what you think of this. So, when you talked over me in the meeting this morning, I felt undermined. Can we have a chat about it? When you were late with the data this morning, I felt rushed and pressured to get the report ready for Clive. Can we talk about how to manage the timelines going forward? When you cancel my one-to-one meetings, I feel let down and unimportant. Can we look at how we schedule them so that timing works for both of us? So far, we've talked about developmental feedback. You can also use this for positive feedback as well. So let people know what they're doing well and what you would like them to repeat doing. When you stayed late and helped me finish the PowerPoint, I felt valued and appreciated. Thank you for taking the time to support me. And then a final one here. When you asked the follow-up question in the meeting, it helped to diffuse the tension in the room. So this is from a third-party perspective. That was a great way to handle the finance director's concerns. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about how you can use a super, super simple structure to provide feedback when you, I feel, and why it's so important to only provide feedback from your perspective and to stay on your side of the net, because if you do that, you'll stay in blue head and you can have a clear and kind conversation that is the start of a problem-solving conversation rather than one that's around blame and judgment. So, what I'd like you to do, sorry, let me just talk about feelings. Quite often people feel, you know, is it appropriate to talk about feelings in the workplace? And I would suggest absolutely yes. Hopefully what you've seen from the brain model is we are emotional beings. We are tracked and driven by our feelings if we're not careful. Feelings tell us what is important. So if you're feeling agitated, why? If you're feeling annoyed, why? Get curious, all right? They are data. They tell us what is working, what is not. And often when you're having negative emotions, it is because it is out of line with your values. When you're having good emotions, it's often because stuff is happening and this is in line with your values. So I would encourage you, do talk about your feelings. It's absolutely appropriate. Nobody can argue with how you feel. And the mood elevator here, so the mood elevator is by a guy called Larry Sen, and if you're interested in learning more about it, he's got some really nice videos on YouTube around it. But I would encourage you, just get this printed off, put it next to your computer and use it during the day just to track how you are feeling and just to become more articulate about your feelings during the day. You can see here that we've got curious and interested in the middle. And somebody asked the question earlier, if you get triggered, what is the way to put yourself in a more resourceful place? Another way to do it is to name it, to tame it. Can you name the emotion you are feeling in the moment? Because if you can name the emotion, what happens is there are hormones that are dripped from your prefrontal cortex here into the emotional part of your brain that help soothe it. So the more articulate you can be and more accurate you can be about naming your emotion, the more effective you can be to get yourself into a resourceful place. So what I'd like you to do now is to take the example that you thought about earlier. So the feedback conversation that you'd like to be able to have with, about, because. And I'd just like you to spend a moment thinking about how can you invite your colleague into the conversation? How can you frame the feedback with them when I feel? And then how can you invite them to share their perspective? Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of moments to do that. And then if anybody is happy to come off mute and to share their thoughts with us, it would be wonderful to hear from you. So let me just give you a moment to do that. And then we will go into questions. So if anybody is happy to come off mute and to share their thoughts, do you want to just put your hand up and Robin will invite you into the room? That's fine. So I tell you what, if we don't have any volunteers, let's go to the...
We do have lots of questions, so let's find a good one.
Thank you.
Here we go. How does the model change when you're giving feedback on behalf of someone else? So as a line manager, this person often has feedback flags them that they need to communicate on behalf of that person.
Okay, that's a great question. So I would suggest feedback that is fed back on behalf of somebody else is what I would call dirty feedback. And it's about what we really want to do is to create a culture where people are giving their own feedback directly, because that is what is clean, honest, and transparent. So my encouragement would be, where possible, if you have got a team member who doesn't feel comfortable providing feedback to somebody else and has asked you to do it on their behalf, can you coach them? Can you share with them this model and get them in a position where they can provide feedback for themselves? Because that's what's clean. And the person who's on the receiving end of it is much more likely to hear and act on the feedback if it comes from the original person rather than a third person. So that would be my encouragement where possible. Does that help?
I'll see if that comes up in that. Well, I think that was a good answer anyway, and I'm sure it's very helpful answer. Thank you. Okay. It's always difficult on webinars when you can't see people to know whether that was helpful.
I can't see any lovely faces. Okay. Have we got another question, Robin?
Oh, we have lots. What do you do if you are in bluehead but the other is always in redhead mode?
Right, brilliant. Okay. You need to get, okay, so somebody cannot be in redhead for more than 20 minutes. Okay, physically, we cannot be in redhead for more than 20 minutes. There is no point having a conversation with somebody whilst they're in redhead. So if you see somebody is triggered, stop the conversation. Okay, when somebody is redhead, their ability to hear has gone down. They're in black and white thinking. They cannot have a high quality conversation with you. You need to find some creative ways to help that person relax. So I don't know, if we're back in the back in the office, can you go and do a walk and talk? So get yourself out of the office and go for a walk and talk and do the conversation side by side. Can you go and grab a coffee together? Can you get yourself out of the vicinity? But do not waste your breath having the conversation while somebody is triggered and in redhead. It's a waste of time. If you think about it, hospitals do this. If a doctor knows they need to give you bad news, okay, they know they will ask you to bring a loved one with you to that hospital appointment, because they know giving you the bad news will trigger you. You're no longer in a position to hear clearly and to have a quality conversation. And what you need is a listening partner next to you. All right. So if somebody's in redhead, stop. And it might be actually you need to have that conversation at a later stage. But that's the really important part. They've got to be in a resourceful place, otherwise it's a waste of time.
Great. There we go. So don't give feedback to somebody in the redhead.
No, get them into blue. Your first job is to get them into blue. Get them relaxed. Just like we do when we're interviewing people. So when people come for an interview, people are nervous. They are triggered. And the first thing that an interviewer does is spends the first few minutes of an interview getting somebody relaxed so that they are resourceful and they can bring their best selves to that interview. You are looking to do exactly the same in feedback. So, you know, Robin, if I turn around to you and go, Robin, can I give you some feedback? You will be triggered. I need to get you relaxed so that we can have the conversation.
It's very true.
And
now I do feel relaxed. Thank you, Angela.
Oh, no. Have we got another question?
Yeah, just before I do the next question, very quickly, somebody would just like to know the name of the mood elevator.
Larry Sen. So Larry and then Sen, S-E-N-N. So if you just put into YouTube, Larry Sen, the mood elevator, there is a 5-minute video, 6-minute video where he explains the concept of it. And I think it's a super useful model.
Fantastic. There we go. Let's do one more question before we move on to the next part.
Perfect. Thank you, Robin.
Okay. How would you approach the initial invitation to a where's it gone? How would you approach the initial invitation to a discussion with your boss if "can we have a chat about something" wouldn't work?
Oh, so I'm not sure why it wouldn't work. Would the person who asked the question, would you be happy to come off mute and just tell us a little bit more? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Or you can comment in the chat box.
Yes. Is that because they're going to be triggered?
Should we come back to that question and
find? Let's come back to it. So if somebody could clarify that question, I'd be really happy to answer it in the next section.
Okay, here's a good one. How do you give feedback in the moment?
Feedback in the moment? So feedback in the moment is the most powerful feedback you can give. When I feel. So do you know what, Rob? So do you know what, Robin? If you and I were going to give each other feedback at the end of this session, it could literally look before we wrap up. What worked well? What could we do differently? Is a really, really nice way to provide feedback to each other. So what's one thing that worked brilliantly? What's one thing that we could do differently? So you show some appreciation and let people know what they should repeat, but you also give them one idea about what they could do differently to be even more effective going forward. So what worked well, even better if, is how some teams phrase it.
We have heard back from the person who asked that previous question. They can't come on the air because they are in the office, but just to elaborate on that, person who wouldn't respond to a request for a chat, their alarm bells ringing for him.
Okay. So your job there is to keep them as resourceful as possible. So what can you do to frame and set up that invite? So let's call the manager John. So John, I would really appreciate 10 minutes of your time just to discuss something that's concerning me at the moment. when would be convenient for you. You know, it's, I don't really see how anybody could not respond to that. It's very neutral. It's absolutely within your rights. It's appropriate.
I guess it's all about the way it's framed. That person might go, "Oh God, what have I done wrong? I'm in trouble now," and then everything, it all kind of escalates. Maybe
Absolutely.
it's just a way of, "No, you're not in trouble. I just want to highlight something and then work it through collaboratively."
Absolutely, and it's recognizing that somebody is triggered, and it's like, what do you do to keep them resourceful? So stop the worry. It's like, do you know what, there's you know, something's taken place. I think I would really I would respect your thoughts on this. We need to problem solve this. We need to find a way through it. And I think there's something about equal ownership. The other thing that you can do quite nicely is take ownership. If there's an issue, share with somebody what your contribution is. So I don't know, let's just say you've done a joint presentation together and it didn't go very well, and you need to do a debrief afterwards. What you might want to do is just share with somebody what your contribution to the problem is. So, you know, I recognize that perhaps I didn't do enough preparation for this morning's meeting, and that contributed to the issues in the discussion. What I'd love to do is to have a conversation with you so that we can reflect on what took place in this morning's meeting so that we can do a better job next time. And I think there's something about, if you can bring to the table some stuff that you didn't do well and be appropriately humble, it will help bring down the other person's defenses so that they will be appropriately vulnerable with you as well.
Okay, great.
Okay, should we just go into the last section, Robin?
Yes, yes, and then we can do some more questions if we do okay for time.
Magic. Okay, so last thing I just want to talk about is the toolbox, and I've probably hinted at a couple of these already, but these are just a couple of pointers that I think really help you stay in problem-solving mode. So as I keep saying, feedback is the start of a problem-solving conversation. All right, so we talked about it earlier in one of the questions. The best way to stay resourceful, if you feel the temperature rising, if you can feel people going into redhead, insert a break. Take the temperature, take the heat out of the conversation, get everybody back into a cooler place so you can have a conversation that's going from there to there rather than a conversation that's going from there to there. Okay. If you're in a very deep conversation with somebody and you can't remove yourself, the easiest way to take the pressure off yourself in the moment is to ask a question. When you ask a question of the other person, you take the pressure off you for a moment, you get the other person to do the thinking, you've got a moment of reflection, and then hopefully you can come back in a more resourceful way. Second way, which I've also talked about, is assume positive intent. 99% of people's behavior has got a positive intent. Human beings do not embark on behavior that is going to be self-destructive for them. Now, the impact of that behavior may be inappropriate or ineffective on others, but people always have a positive intent for themselves. Okay, so it may be, do you know, I'm up against a deadline. It may be because I promised that I'm going to deliver something by 5 o'clock tonight, and my intent is to meet my promise. My intent is to meet the deadline. Now, it may be that the impact of my behavior is poor on other people because I'm being aggressive, I'm being offhand, I'm being discourteous, but my intent is good because I want to deliver on my promise. And I think, you know, if we can assume positive intent, as I said earlier, it makes us more tolerant, it makes us more curious, and we're much more likely to stay resourceful and have the conversation there with people. And then what we can do is talk about the impact of that behavior on us. And then the final one is, we have got a choice. We can go into these conversations and we can base the conversations either on our values or our feelings, okay? If you're clear about your values, and if you haven't done a values exercise, I'd highly encourage you to do a values exercise so you've got clarity about where you're coming from. Or you can go into a conversation based on your feelings. Feelings are poor navigators. So if we go into a conversation feeling angry or irritated and we emote those feelings, you're probably going to have a less constructive conversation. Whereas, so for me, one of my 8 values is kindness. So if I can go into that conversation in a kind way, okay, being assertive, being really clear about what's appropriate and what's not, what I can do is let somebody know that the impact of their behavior has left me feeling irritated, but I'm having the conversation from the place of my values rather than my feelings. What I'm not going to do is play out the anger. What I'm not going to do is play out the irritation. What I'm not going to do is play out the frustration. Okay, I'm going to explain it, but I'm not going to emote it. So really important difference there. Okay, so Robin, we've got time just for a couple more questions before we need to wrap up. So have we got any more questions that we can do here?
We do, yes, we've got.
Lovely.
Yes, okay. So questions regarding the values exercise. Do you have something, do you have a good example of a value exercise that you could share? Someone's asked about just really what is the just a bit more information on the values exercise.
Yes. Okay. So I've got an exercise that I can share, and I can put I can share a link to that. Websites like Mind Tools have a really nice one as well. So you might want to have a look at Mind Tools. I'm just trying to think who else does off the top of their head. I'm really happy to share a link to some of my materials afterwards if people want to do that.
Angela, if you want to send me a link to something relevant, I can add that to the follow-up email that gets sent out when the recording's available on the website.
Lovely, thank you.
So that would be so that answers that one. How do you give feedback to a direct report who has received feedback from their own direct report and ignored it? So basically, the issue has been escalated up to them.
Okay. So a model that I use for this, okay, and it's obviously I would use a model called we, you, me, agree. Okay, so I'm conscious that we're introducing another model at this stage, but we've got a slightly more complicated feedback situation here, and I think we need another structure for it. But we is setting the objective of the conversation. So you need to set the parameters of the conversation and what you want to achieve. You then invite your colleague's perspective, so the colleague that you need to have the conversation with. Me, you then share your perspective and what you have heard and what the issue is, and then agree is you are problem solving together. So it's a more elongated process from what we've talked about already. And again, I can send you a link to this model if you're interested in learning more about it. But if you've got more in-depth feedback, we, you, me, agree is a really nice 4-step model for more in-depth feedback.
Great. How are we doing on time? Okay, let's see this question here. Do you have any tips on written versus face-to-face feedback?
Okay. Okay, I would always do face-to-face where possible. So if you think about it, given our virtual world at the moment, the quality of the communication. So if you have got a sticky subject, if you know somebody's going to be triggered, the best way to give feedback is face-to-face. After that, you want to do video. After that, telephone. After that, email, written, and after that, text. Okay, I would say that is your pyramid in terms of quality of communication. So if you have got really important feedback that needs to land and may be difficult for somebody to receive, I would absolutely do it face-to-face and be courageous. And if you can't because of current restrictions, then video. Of course, written is absolutely fine, and for some feedback it's appropriate, but you know what's more important and what's not. So that for me would be my pyramid, and I would decide what's the importance of the feedback and where does it sit in there.
Okay, so always aim for face-to-face.
Yes, yeah.
If possible. Okay, I think we're doing good on time at the moment. Okay, somebody would like to know, how do you handle feedback to a whole team?
Oh, great. I think you can use exactly the same structure. So if it's short and simple feedback, I feel. So do you know what, if you've got a team that's absolutely incapable of starting a team meeting together, so if you're the line manager and the team is incapable of starting together at 10 o'clock, they're all still coming onto calls at 10:05 and getting coffees. I think you could give them feedback as a group together on the inappropriateness of their timekeeping and what impact that's having on you as a manager. If it's a bigger piece of feedback, I would use we, you, me, agree, which is probably another webinar to explore that process in more detail.
I've got one final question here, which kind of looks at it from the other side. Somebody here says, how long should you wait to give feedback if you're the one who is the redhead? This person once had to wait a week to give someone feedback as they were so angry and incensed.
How long should you take to give feedback? Okay, so ideally, you want to give feedback as close as possible to the incident. Okay, so it's back to that issue that we talked about earlier. So problem being raised, conversation taking place. The shorter that lag, the stronger, I would say, the relationship. If you are so incensed about something, I think you need to go away and explore and figure out what is driving a level of anger that's taking a week to sort out. And absolutely, of course, there will be some behaviors that do that. But I do think if you can go away and think very carefully, using some of the ideas that we've talked about today, what it will do is to help bring some rationality to what is going on. So what is it that is driving the anger? What is the behavior? Specifically, what is the behavior that is upsetting you so much? And actually, what do you need somebody to do differently? So I would suggest the process here will help reduce that time lag and get you into a more resourceful place to have the conversation quicker.
Well, I think that was our final question. There are a few more comments. They do seem to be around similar themes, actually, so I hope that that has helped for everybody.
Okay, so just final message from me, and then I will hand back over to Robin. So if you were to take one message away from today, for me it would be clear as kind, unclear as unkind. So do not tiptoe around feedback. Use the models that we've talked about today so you can have a high quality, resourceful conversation.